Wonderful families there, finishing off Aoife Hegarty's report. Bressie, I call you Bressie because your family and friends all call you that. You listen to that and you've been very courageous because you yourself as a teenager, you went through issues like that, didn't you? Mental health issues.
Yeah, well, I went through them as a teenager, but completely and utterly undiagnosed. And they got worse as I became an adult. And you'd start learning to deal with different things, but I didn't know what I had. I always thought it was asthma. I had breathing difficulties a lot, and I started getting very frustrated with it. And you know, as a teenager, you want to know what's wrong. You're trying to figure it out, and you can't rationalise what it is. And I went through kind of times where I wasn't able to socialise. I just hid myself in my room, very frustrated, and I even went as far as breaking my own arm, you know, just off a chair, because it was frustration. And I actually felt if I went into hospital, something would happen. Somebody would be able to tell me what was wrong. That's where I was with it. And it kind of, luckily, I came from a very strong family, really, really good family. I didn't have any kind of compounding issues that some other people might have. And I also was very into sport, so I had that sense of kind of team, which I felt really helped. But yeah, no, it started as a teenager, and it was pretty consuming, to be honest.
Would it have made a huge difference to you if you felt at the time it was something you could talk about with your friends, or was it something you felt you didn't even have the language to talk about?
And that's exactly why I came out and talked about it now. The one thing that affects me the most when I hear about suicides is when I hear I can only talk about my own personal experiences. I'm not here to talk about statistics. I'm not here to talk about suicide in general. I'm just understand how I rationalised it in my head as a teenager, that I was lucky enough to have done it. The real issue, or the real reason I came out to speak about it, was to normalise it, really, to make it something that wasn't. I spoke about, on the Cycling and Suicide, twisting my knee pretty badly and limping off the bike and going to the doctor, and everyone goes, what's wrong with your knee, what's wrong with your knee? I want us to get to that point with mental health, because, as I said, mental health doesn't have a limp. You can't see it, so you assume it doesn't exist, and you can't figure out how bad or how not so bad it is. So yeah, it was definitely a difficult thing for me to come out and speak about it, but in hindsight it was one of the best decisions I ever made, and I wish I'd made it when I was 15.
And it doesn't mean, yeah, you were really courageous to come out. And it doesn't mean, when other people are listening, it doesn't mean it all goes away, Bressie. Sure, it doesn't, like even on The Voice recently, but it means you know what it is now. Tell me some of those experiences recently, but you know how to deal with it now. Well,
I mean, I suppose it kind of went away a little bit. It was always there. It's general anxiety disorder is what I ultimately was diagnosed with. And it kind of went away a little bit in college. It was still there, you know, exam time would come up and you'd probably not deal with it as well as you should. But I was playing sport, and I was playing professional sport at that time, so I was training twice a day, and I was basically, I didn't have time to think about it, and I was constantly on the go. But then, obviously, as I went through my 20s, it kind of came up again in a much more militant way. And the kind of defining moment for me in the whole process was the second live show of The Voice last year. And I hadn't done a lot of television, I was pretty inexperienced. And at 6:15, we'd always get a knock on our door to get mic'd, to go up to our stage manager, knock on the door, say get up to the stage, ready to go live. And just as a knock came, I was on the floor. I wasn't able to breathe. I wasn't able to hear. I was sweating. My shirt was ripped. My legs went from underneath me. I was having an acute, severe panic attack, which I had had in the past, but nothing like this. And that was it. I went back to my hotel that night, and I'm a strong enough person to have went, right, that's it. I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to control it, and I'm going to fight back. Really, that was the big thing. My family and friends all said, you're the most focused, competitive person I've ever met in my life. Anything you really go for, you always kind of work hard to get it. Why don't you deal and approach anxiety like that? And so I did. So, I figured out the way mental health works is there is ways of dealing with it. There's so many ways of dealing with it, really, and controlling it. But you can't get to any of those ways until you talk. That's the first step, has to be the first step. And literally, I started shouting it from the rooftops. Once it came out, it just didn't stop, because I've been repressing it for so long. I came out about it in the press. I felt the journalist that I talked to, I trusted. He wouldn't twist it. He wouldn't belittle what I was talking about, and he didn't. And it was the best thing. I'm so happy. And with the Cycling and Suicide, the talks that we've been doing, the impact we're having. You're seeing 15-year-old boys on the street clapping us into towns in groups. like I wasn't even diagnosed at 15. The GP was nearly mumbled the word when he said it to me, looked at the ground, because it just wasn't something they wanted to say. So it's great to see teenagers now actually, unfortunately, experiencing suicide and mental health, but in some way that's a fortunate thing now. It's getting out there, and our job now is to just knock the walls down. That stigma is really the biggest obstacle at the moment for me personally, and for me to see. But me getting rid of that, my life has now completely changed. Yeah.
And your role in it is very, very important in breaking down stigma. I want to go to Jack Kerwin, our audience. Jack, you're younger than Bressie. I think you're about 19.
Yeah.
Tell us, do you mind sharing your story? Because you went through dark times, didn't you, Jack?
Yeah, basically I was about 15 or 16, and the way I kind of start telling my story to everyone is, you know, I had supposedly the perfect life from everybody else looking in. I was quite sociable. I had lots of friends. I played a lot of rugby, and you know, I had a lot of support, and I had a great family. But unfortunately, I started to get kind of anxiety attacks as well, and stuff like that. And I had gone on a trip to New Zealand for about 4 months, which is kind of the best thing I'd ever done in my life. When I got back, it was a huge anticlimax, and with all the stuff I had, I still didn't feel right. I felt kind of still horrible about myself. And then it kind of, after about 2-3 years, it led to eventually me trying to commit suicide. So, you know, I kind of respect all the people that come out and talk about it, and all the families that we just saw there, because I know what I put my own family through without it happening. And I kind of commend anyone that comes out and talks about it. And I know what it's like to be there, and I know how dark it is to be in that place.
When you tried to take your own life, Jack, did you know how final it was? Because people often wonder, teenage boys, did you know how final it would be?
To be perfectly honest, I had thought about it an awful lot. I think the common misconception with the whole thing is that teenagers really don't understand. I think with me, I understood fully. I knew exactly what I was doing, but I was really, really sick. I didn't decide that I wanted to commit suicide. The sickness decided that I wanted to commit suicide. I couldn't deal with it anymore. I couldn't function in everyday life. I was embarrassed about who I was. I hated everything about myself. And living that way it's horrible to go through. And I think the main problem is that people don't understand suicide in this country, and people don't understand how you get to that point. People don't understand how you kind of how lonely it is, and how kind of horrible you feel.
And you eventually went to St. Pat's, and you've made a great recovery. You're in UCD now. If there's any young person watching you tonight, Jack, feeling as you used to feel, what would you say to them?
Basically, I'll just say that it's okay to feel bad, but please just talk. I know that in the split second that I decided not to take my own life, it's the best decision I ever made. And I know we've lost so many people that didn't have that split second in their head. And hopefully, if there's a young person watching out there, life is a gift, and it's there to be lived, and we don't always have to suffer. And places like St. Pat's Hospital are there, unbelievable people there to help us. So just, there's always hope. And I hope that if any young person is watching it, they can see that you can get through it, you can recover. And my life is better now than it ever has been, and I'm stronger now than I ever have been.
You're an amazing young man, Jack, isn't he, Bressie? I mean, it's 19 to come out and be that courageous.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't courageous enough at 19 to say it. And the thing about it is, it's the message that we need to get across more than anything is that it is dealable with.
Yeah.
We have this mythical, haunting approach to it, that it's some demon that we have, and at the end of the day, it's scientific. It's, there's a way of treating it. It might be, in my case, I went through a few different routes to find where I had to go through. what we said is like, once you talk, you've two roads, and we want to block the road. That idea of that's even an option. Suicide should not even become part of like the conversation anymore. But this road has so many options, and the one I took was personal fitness. I did the maths essentially on it. I knew that, you know, what does fitness do? Serotonin levels, it raises serotonin levels. So I said, well, we'll give this a go. I set myself a goal, which is probably a very important thing as well. I'm doing my first triathlon in a couple of weeks. I never swam really until January, but I felt if I gave myself a goal and I trained for something, maybe this will work, and it did.
Great.
It won't work for everybody.
Yeah,
that's the approach I took. You know, there is so many approaches to take, and as soon as we realise and we talk about it, you'll see that there are so many roads to take that isn't, unfortunately, suicide.
Jim, Lucy, you're in charge of that place, St. Pat's, that Jack praised so much, probably largely saved his life.
Jack's a wonderful man. I mean, that's the man who needs to be praised here.
And when you, though, I've got to name check the Moira and John O'Sullivan there talking about their son Alan, and Martin and Cora O'Brien about David. I mean, break your heart.
I think everybody here in the studio, and I'm sure at home, is feeling the enormous emotion and power of the testimony that people have given. And I think it's hugely generous of Jack and Brezzy, but also the people from Kerry. I mean, people listening here, there will be people at home contemplating despair. There'll be people here bereaved for those who've ended their lives by suicide, and there'll be the others who are thinking maybe there's no point in going on. And what we need to do is to realise that that's real pain and that's real suffering that can be addressed. People need to be able to speak up and come and get help. The bulk of suicide arises from treatable mental health distress. And that's something we need to be able to say positively. Treatable mental health distress. So that the bulk of these problems, even if they're long-standing and going on, we've heard about anxiety disorders, which is a remarkable one, if I can bear with me. Most people who present to a service with an anxiety disorder such as Brezzy or Jack described have been suffering for 10 years before they had any opportunity to tell their story. And so these things tend to be long-standing. But then additionally, people can despair acutely when they're intoxicated by either frustration or alcohol or overwhelming events.
How do we do as a country? I mean, you know, in Germany, these multi-models, like, what's your view? Are we doing enough to try and stop what's happening?
We need to do much, much more. And I suppose the positive story is we can do much more. We bash our health services every day, and the good people working in the health services feel the pressure. But I want to speak up for what we could do if we worked together, if we supported primary care, if we recognised that actually we're not talking about physical buildings or jobs. We're talking about services and care that's effective, recovery plans that deliver and are available to people to come to. And what's being done in the voluntary sector is extraordinary. Pieta House's achievements are amazing. And so we can tend to get locked into the battle about politics and policy. It is the case that in euro for euro, we've reduced our mental health spend. And there is no doubt that our ambivalence about the alcohol industry is causing us to mislead ourselves about the positive, poisonous effects.
Bring in Jim, the Minister there who's joining us in Cork. Minister, pound for pound, euro by euro, as Jim Lucy said, we've reduced our spend. And maybe at a time like this, Minister, we need to be spending more, given the stories we've just heard tonight.
Well, just to start by saying that I don't think that the two previous speakers in sharing their own personal stories for us are not generous. I think they're terribly brave, and I genuinely feel that. But over the years, the spending on mental health has been reduced, but we've managed to claw that back, and I know that Jim and his organisation do an extraordinary job in a very concentrated fashion, but we have managed to claw back additional funding, which we are putting into the community rather than into institutions. We've managed to get 70 million in the last 2 years, and that in itself will ensure that the type of help that when people reach out for that help, and that's vitally important. You know, it's okay to be saying to people that reach out, ask, but we have to ensure that the help is there when they do reach out as well. And I think that above all else is the central point of all of this. Help is there when you reach out for it.
Okay, Minister, I'll be coming back to you. We just need to take a break, but we'll be coming back to all of this. Join us in a few moments.